Well, hello everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. I'm going to be using new products from Tim Holtz's Sizzix collection, which I have to tell you is magnificent. There are some really great dies in this collection, along with some embossing folders, and I'm going to be using quite a few elements from the release to make this beautiful Christmas tag. I was really intrigued by the vintage sled that is part of this collection. It's got a bunch of pieces that you can use to build up this image and create something similar to what you see on the packaging. So I'm going to start picking elements out and figuring out what I'm going to use to cut them from. There are little sprigs of holly and greens. We've got elements to add pieces to the sled to make it more dimensional. And I'm going to start first by die cutting the base of the sled and also the holiday bow from some red cardstock. Then I picked out the other additional sled components, one of which is the wood grain, and that's going to get cut from some Nina Desert Storm. So I'm going to corral all these pieces inside of a dish. I find this helpful when I'm working with dies like this from Tim Holtz, is to have dishes on hand that I can use to hold my pieces so that I don't lose them on my desk. This one just happens to be a cute cat bowl I had on hand. I'm going to glue all of my pieces down with some craft tacky glue from Simon's Stamp. This is a really nice strong adhesive and it does dry clear. So if you do have any adhesive go outside the edges of your paper, you will not see it once it dries. These wood grain elements are really cool. They add some nice texture to the sled, and we'll actually enhance that later with a bit of ink to really bring that wood grain out. You could, of course, cut these from any color you want. I really liked the touch of red that was in the packaging on this sled, so that's why I chose the red color. And the browns are great for adding that nice wood base. Now, there are little dies that actually can make the hardware for the sled, but I thought I'd step it up a notch and actually take some hardware from Tim Holtz. These are little mini brads. I'm cutting the ends off of the brads and then gluing them on to my sled. I know it's very tedious and it did take quite a bit of time to do, but the end result is so cool and I love how it turned out. Here's where I'm going to start adding some ink blending. I'm using Walnut Stain Distressing. It's one of my favorites for adding vintage texture to some of my projects. I actually just recently used it on a pumpkin project that I shared on the Simon's Stamp blog, which also used Tim Holtz dies. I'm going to use a detailed blending brush to help me get into some of these smaller areas, and it also allows me to have more control so I don't add too much ink in areas where I don't want it. But see how we add the ink to the wood grain texture here and it's really bringing that out? I always love with this part because it's like magic when you start to see the beautiful details come through. Okay, so our sled base is ready. We just need to start adding some additional details. I thought I would add a vintage touch by using some foundry wax from Tim Holtz, and I'm going to paint it on, a lot of it onto the hardware because I wanted the hardware to have a little bit more of a weathered look. But then I also did add some spots of this foundry wax to different areas of the sled. It's a subtle touch and it will get covered up by some other elements, but it does make a difference when you see little touches like this pop through on your project. I always like going the extra mile to add the details. So here we are with the sled, we're making progress, and now I'm going to start working on the bow that will go on top. I cut this, like I said, from that red cardstock, and there are little pieces that you can glue onto it to make it look a little bit more dimensional, which I am doing here. I'm using some craft tacky glue and my place and pierce tool from Simon's Stamp to help me do that. I also die cut the greenery from the vintage sled set, and I'm using some Simon's Stamp ink and a blending brush to add a little bit of shading to that. I had cut it from green cardstock, but the shading adds some detail. And then with my finger and some grit texture paste, I'm going to go ahead and apply this on top of my little elements and then run them through some Distress Rock Candy glitter to be able to create a frosty snow on these pieces. And I'll actually do this again later for some other greenery that's going to go around the sled. So now we're ready to work on the base of our tag, and this tag I'm actually using this die set from Tim Holtz to be able to make it. This is the largest tag from this set, and I'm going to cut it from a Christmas backdrop. I really liked the green color of this. I thought this looked nice with the vintage sled, and we're going to emboss it with the new holiday knit sweater background embossing folder from Tim Holtz. I'll put this inside the folder, which fits perfectly, and we'll run this through my die cut machine. Now you can't really see it right now, but we're gonna make this come to life. First, I wanted to distress the background with a little bit of green to add some variation to that green color. So this isn't really going to make the embossing stand out too much, but what it will do is it's going to add a little bit of extra touches of different color here to be able to enhance the colors of the background. Where the magic happens is when we bring in that walnut stained distress ink that I used earlier, and we're going to run it over top of this background and make those images come out. So we're really touching this lightly onto the paper. I don't want to put too much ink on all at once because I don't want to have the ink go down into the recessed areas of the pattern. But by giving this pad a gentle rub over top of the embossing, we get the details to come through and it looks so good. So here we are, our background is ready to go. We just need to start gluing elements together. So I pulled out this new die set, also part of the Tim Holtz Sizzix collection. It's a great set of Christmas foliage. And I'm not gonna use all of these elements, but I will use a couple of different things from this set, including these pine branches. I die cut them from some teal cardstock and then using a darker teal ink from Simon, I'm going to ink blend over top to add some shading. Then I also colored in this holly branch. This one actually comes in multiple pieces. So I colored the stems with a little bit of brown ink, and then for the leaves that are gonna layer back on top of that area, I just shaded them with a little bit of green, and we also are going to color in some berries with some red cardstock, but I'll get to that in a second. Each of these holly stems have 2 leaves that layer on top of the stem itself, and then you're gonna have the berries that will go on top of those little round areas. I die cut those from red cardstock, and then I'm using a red ink from Simon Says Stamp to add a little bit of shading. And if you are interested in any of the products that I'm mentioning today, including the new dyes, the ink colors I've chosen, all the products in between, I have all of that linked below in the video description and on my blog for you to check out. So definitely look over there if there's anything here that you are curious about. So here's where I'm going to glue the little berries onto those little round areas of my holly branch. And I'm actually going to enhance those berries a bit by adding some glossy accents on top. This is going to make them look shiny, which will give them a realistic feel. Like I did earlier with that grit texture paste, I'm going to apply that onto my little evergreen branches here. This is going to make them look like they're flocked with snow, and I also did that same technique of applying some glitter on top of that paste before it dried to be able to give it a little sparkle. I'm going to glue these onto my tag. I'm going to put some glue in the centers of those stems and then just lay them on top. This craft tacky glue is super strong, so you really don't need a lot to hold these elements in place. The sled is going to go right in the middle. I actually used foam tape to attach this down because I did want to have a little bit of dimension off of the background and the greenery that's there. Speaking of greenery, the greenery that was included in the vintage sled set that we colored earlier, I'm going to glue that on top of the sled right in the center, and then the bow is going to sit on top. A nice holiday sprig of greenery, which looks really pretty. Now, as I was making this, I kept thinking of the Christmas song of "Oh, what fun it is to ride in one horse open sleigh." Now, I know this isn't a sleigh, but it's a sled, and I thought the "Oh, what fun" is just too cute to be able to go with the sled. So I'm going to die cut these letters from the Colorize Santa set. You saw that as I was holding it there on screen. I die cut the words "Oh, what fun" from red and also cream cardstock. And my plan is to stack 3 of each letter on top of each other, so that way I have some dimensional letters which make them feel more like an embellishment. And I'll glue these on top of the sled and the greenery here, which I think adds a nice touch of whimsy to the whole project. I did enhance the word "what" with a little bit of ink blending on the letters before I glued them down, which is going to give them just a little bit more of a weathered feel. But the cream letters I didn't add any ink blending to. So my tag is on a piece of Tim Holtz's holiday backdrops, which has a pattern on the other side. And in order for me to be able to have a nice place to be able to write to or from on the back side, I thought I would cut a simple green tag from that same tag die, and I'll glue it to the back side of my beautiful tag here, which is now going to give me a nice clean place to write on. There are reinforcers that go with these tags, and so I'm going to cut one of the tag reinforcers from some of Simon Says Stamp's matte champagne cardstock. I am going to also apply some of that same foundry wax that I used on the vintage sled to go ahead and distress it a little bit. So I'll set that foundry wax so that it has a nice shiny appearance, and then I'll glue those on top of my tags using my craft tacky glue. I'm going to put one on the front and also one on the back, which gives everything a nice cohesive and clean finish. We're getting towards the end of this project, but I did want to add a few embellishments. I pulled out some ephemera from a Tim Holtz Idea-ology pack. This was a Christmas pack from last year, and it's one of my favorites. I used this one that says skates. I'm going to stick that underneath of the sled along the bottom. And then I also pulled out Tim Holtz's Remnant rubs. This is the Christmas pack, and there's this cute little Christmas seal that I thought was adorable. I'm going to use my bone folder to be able to apply that down onto my tag. And then to make sure it blends in nicely, I also used that same ink to be able to distress it a little bit just so it blends in nicely. I also pulled out some of Tim Holtz's stickers from his Christmas sticker book. I'm picking out a few different sayings that I found in the word mix on the back pages, and I'm just going to put a few of these here around my tag. I distress these as well, helps them blend in nicely. And then I also die cut a few snowy drops from one of Tim's older die sets. I'll have that linked below too. And I just thought these would be fun to cut from some glitter paper and put around my sled. They kind of remind me of snowballs. The finishing touch was to add some velvet trims for the tie at the top of my tag, and I even tied on a little snowflake adornment to give another nod to the snowy feel of this tag and also add a bit of sparkle. It's just so much fun to be able to see all these pieces get used together to make a really cool textured tag. This is a large tag, so I'm going to have to put it on a big gift. I think it'll look really cool. I'll have to find some fun holiday paper to put with it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this project using the new Tim Holtz Sizzix collection. These are just some of Tim's awesome Christmas dies that are part of this release, so I hope you go check it out. I have links below in the video description and on my blog for you to be able to find the products that I used and also the entire release. Thanks for tuning in today. I'll be back soon to share more with you all, but until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful day.